Hi everybody, my name is Michael Knipp, and we are here for a different type of video today, something that's not a normal review or a vlog. This is going to be a little bit of a sequel to my millennial ponders at cloud video or whatever that was called, where I just kind of talked about some things I was thinking about, and then we can have a discussion down in the comments down below. So the main topic that I wanted to discuss today was predictability in storytelling. Something really common that I see in book reviews on BookTube are how predictability makes a story bad. And we're not just talking about thrillers, but it's common in thrillers when you say, oh, I knew what was going to happen in the ending, I called it from the beginning, and because of that, they don't think very highly of that book. I've definitely said this myself, but I think that if we actually dive into that subject, it's not as simple as you might initially assume. I think if we're being completely honest with ourselves, most stories are at least somewhat predictable. I've heard it said before that there are only I don't remember the specific numbers, but I've heard it said before that there are only 10 different types of stories, and the only variation that really exists is the different ways that you tell them and the voices of the characters within. I think this is a really common thing. With a lot of stories, when you actually break them down, most of them follow similar patterns, and the only thing that distinguishes them can be the journey that it takes to get to the end. And we're not even talking just books with a ton of foreshadowing. A lot of times, if you're going to see a movie or read a book or something, you can generally guess how the series is going to end. The more specific you dive down, the less predictions you can accurately make. But let's say you pick up a young adult fantasy series where there's a chosen one who is supposed to learn to use their powerful skills and defeat the Dark One. We know how it's going to end. We don't know every single beat along the way, but we know the ending of that story before we even start reading it. One of the maybe biggest glaring examples of this that I see on BookTube is with romances. Oftentimes we describe romances by the tropes that they have within them, which means inherently that you know what's going to happen in the story. If you pick up a friends to lovers romance, you know they're going to fall in love. If you pick up an enemies to lovers romance, you know they're going to fall in love. And we use those terms to describe the books and to recommend the books by their tropes, in essence, spoiling the story by the trope tag that we give them. We know exactly what's happening. Why do we still enjoy reading those when they are predictable, but we don't enjoy some stories that are too predictable? I would posit that for something like a romance, the journey of the story is the majority of the draw. In a romance, you may know that two characters are going to fall in love, but the specifics of how they do that and seeing cute interactions between people talking together, that may be the real reason we're there. We know the people are going to fall in love. In a chosen one fantasy archetype story, we know what's going to happen, but we want to see the journey. We want to see the way the characters grow along the way, the friends that they make, the cool places that they can visit, the magical artifacts they can unearth. But when push comes to shove, we can probably tell what's going to happen at the end. In a thriller, I feel like we can explain it the most, because I feel like in a thriller or a murder mystery whodunit sort of situation, a lot of times part of the experience of those books is trying to figure it out with the clues that you've been given as a reader. So if you're reading a murder mystery book, you may find it annoying if it's something you're supposed to figure out along the way and you can guess it right from the beginning. Because for those books, maybe the final plot point is the whole reason that you're reading it. But for a great number of stories, I don't think that is the case. So I think we should draw a distinction between a murder mystery or a thriller type book and pretty much any other types of books that exist. If we step outside that zone and we talk about the other books that we might complain about for being too predictable, I think there's just some better language that we can use as readers and booktubers and people that talk about books among ourselves than using the predictable tag. Oftentimes as readers, I think we want to be the most accurate and concise as possible when we're trying to talk about books, and so I think we should probably start using the word predictable a little bit less often and try to be a little bit more specific with what we mean. Because, just pulling this off the top of my dome, I think what most people say when they're thinking that something is predictable is that they've just seen that story before. We exist in 2020 and we consume stories in numerous ways. Video games, books, television shows, movies, audio dramas, plays, I don't know, I'm sure I'm forgetting something. But I think that most of the time that people complain about things being predictable, it's because they feel like a story just ripped off its plot twists from another story. I feel like most of the times that we say that something is, oh, this story was so predictable, I knew what was going to happen from jump, it means I've read this story before and it did not add enough unique or interesting elements to the story to keep me interested. A little bit of a side tangent, I once read this book called The Theory of Fun in Game Design, which is actually talking about how to engage people, what entertains people. It's specifically about video games, but I think it's applicable to many things in life, puzzles, things that your brain has to work out. In that book, it talks about like there being a comfort zone between something being so easy we don't have to use our brain at all, and so complex that it is seen as an impossibility to overcome. And the way that we find something that is fun or engaging for us in an enjoyable entertainment fashion is by finding something that's between those two lines. I think that as people that exist in 2020, we have seen so many stories, especially if you're getting older into your 20s, or maybe even older, that you have seen so many stories, you've experienced so many stories and have lived in so many worlds and seen the world through so many characters' eyes, that when we pick up a story and we have those familiarity triggers go off in our brain, we say, oh, I know what's going to happen here because I've seen that story already. And I think that familiarity is obviously what triggers us into saying that this was too predictable. But to me, it almost seems more accurate to say something is too derivative. We then, as people talking about books, can point to the sources that we come up with that say, oh, this story is too much like this. This story is too much like this. And our real problem with the book is that it took something that we knew existed, we've seen before in some other storytelling medium, maybe many times, and it just didn't add enough of its own unique flavor. Obviously, this all comes down to preference. When I think about the elements talked about in that book, The Theory of Fun for Game Design, it's very different for different people because younger people may not have read as many books, or just people that haven't read very many books or seen very many movies, they don't know as many stories. So something that may be a common trope for one person may blow someone else's socks off. But I think that if we are honest, many times our favorite stories are super predictable. But the actual reason that we connect with them is some other emotional or intellectual stimulant or hook for us that we attach to that really has nothing to do with understanding where the plot is going before it happens. I would also probably encourage us to think about something else. It's easy, I think, to not think about predicting the plot all the time if a book is doing a very good job at keeping us entertained with the here and the now and the relevance of the current events in the book. I think there are times that we can get caught into these very tropey or predictable stories because the story is told so well in the word by word, sentence by sentence, chapter by chapter telling experience of the story itself. I also want to state, as an addendum, I kind of don't have a problem with things being too predictable or derivative. There are constantly people added into age demographic, reading pools, moviegoers, etc. There are always new people who are coming up in a world where they have not experienced every single thing that's come before. Additionally, people may love the idea of mixing something super common with something else super common to come up with something that they feel is unique and might identify with a lot of other people as being really cool. In those instances, some readers especially can say, that's a predictable plot, or that's too derivative. They may not identify with it, but there is a place for that for many people. I just think the truth of the matter is, when you're not identifying with something, it's because you've seen too many things that trigger in your brain, I know where this story is going, and there is not enough interesting or unique individual takes on any of the aspects in here, the characters, the dialogue, the writing style, and it fails to stimulate the part of our brain that wants to try to experience something new. Now, of course, on the flip side of this, you have something that is entirely too unpredictable, which I think is something that also can trigger your brain as a reader, a story experiencer, whatever the word is for that. And that's, if a story is too unpredictable, that is, it's just too random, it doesn't feel real or earned, or it pulls you completely out of a story. I feel like randomness is just as effective as overfamiliarity, in some ways maybe more effective at overcoming our suspension of disbelief. No one wants a story that is just so random all the time that it doesn't make sense and there was no leading up to it and it doesn't follow internal logic. That's how we get professional wrestling storylines. There! I said it! Wrestling fans, suck it. There's a lot of video games that do this, as well as the book Children of Virtue and Vengeance as well. But I mainly bring that point up because if you see a lot of people say, oh, these books are too predictable, or this genre is too predictable, or every time I read this, it's too predictable. The alternative to that would be making everything less and less predictable, and you could easily go too far in the other direction and make it so random and so unpredictable and so unfollowable that it doesn't make any sense. We are looking for books or stories that meet the sweet middle ground between familiarity and things that make sense, with elements that we can connect to, characters we can empathize with, positions we can understand. But if we understand them too much, we've learned every lesson there is about a subject, or a young protagonist is learning something that we've learned a million times and we don't actually care about the character. A lot of times the things that we call too predictable are actually some other major flaw that we may have with the series, and I think we can just be better about talking about them as a community. Because once again, I don't think that the stories that we love are really that unpredictable at their cores. I feel like I've been ranting for a long time. I think I hit most of my major points. What do you guys think about this subject? Please, I'd love to have comment discussions down below, or follow me on Twitter or Instagram or something. I feel like there was a lot of interesting, fun discussion had about the last one of these types of videos that I did. I would love to hear from you guys and hear your thoughts on this topic. Do you think I'm way off base? Do you think I have a point? What are some ways that you think, as readers and book discussioners, that we could be more accurate in our language when we're talking about problems that we may have with books? If you'd like to see more videos from me, please remember to subscribe. If you like this video, please give it a like. I don't want to come across as too judgy in this video, mostly because I'm just spitballing. I'm just throwing ideas out there. Until next time, I'm not your dad, but I am your best friend.
No one ever get enough. Always looking out tired. Sleep. No one ever get enough. If I don't show up, I might get fired. Sleep. No one ever get enough. Always looking out tired. Sleep. No one ever get enough. If I don't show up, I might get fired.